Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us wherever you are on the planet. I have seen people join already from Tokyo, from India. More will join us from Europe, Middle East, Africa. And good morning to you in the US and Canada. Last year, McKinsey Company ran a survey with 5,000 people in the US, UK, and China, presenting the trends defining the wellness economy. And at the time, 82% of respondents said that wellness was important for them. 42 said it was a priority, especially when spending money on women's health, which is now a $1 trillion market, healthy aging, weight management, gut health, sleep, and so many more. Big question, have these numbers evolved? To answer this question and more, today we are joined by Eric Falardeau, partner McKinsey Company based in Montréal. Bonjour Eric.
Hey, bonjour, Jean-Guy. How's everybody doing?
Eric, you're leading the new business building practice in North America within consumer. You're also leading the McKinsey Company fitness and wellness practice globally. And you are one of the leaders of McKinsey's consumers insights capability. I had the chance to meet you and listen to you at FIBO in Germany 2 years ago, last March. You spoke very eloquently with one of your partners based in London at the World Spa and Wellness Convention. And at the time, you spoke about the imperatives and opportunities of AI for wellness companies. So we are now live on Facebook with participants and ambassadors from the World Wellness Weekend, joining us from the US, Canada, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia. Did I forget a continent? Maybe Antarctica. And we're very grateful for your time today as you unveil the future of Wellness 2024 with a 25-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute Q&A session. Eric, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Jean-Guy. And yeah, it's good that you recall the last two occasions we had to participate. I usually like to use these sessions for provocation to the group, and then I look forward to the Q&A. This one will be very different. We will walk through the results of our 2025 Future of Wellness report, which is a survey that was fielded at the end of 2024 across 4 markets. I'll walk through that in a second. It is the fourth time that we do this, and we get good feedback on the database being useful for business leaders as they make decisions. So it'll be a bit more of a monologue this time, walking through facts. Hopefully they are helpful to the group that having the chance to listen. Our report will be published near the end of this week, so you look more to see some in-depth information. So hopefully this is helpful. I was talking about the research here, tick, tick. The research is fielded in 4 different countries, the United States, UK, Germany, and China. We talk to about 3,000 to 4,000 consumers per market as we do this. So this is the fielding that we do. And as mentioned, it's the fourth year that we're doing this. We've been doing this ever since 2021 or 2020. I'm not remembering exactly. And it's the reason why I call that out is it permits to have a longitudinal view. So I'll get back to that 82% that Jean-Guy mentioned in the introduction in a few minutes. So for the purpose of today's discussion, because insights are even more useful when you double click on a country, the facts we will see are for the United States. We have the very similar documents for each of the 4 countries that you see over here. What I will call out is when you take a look at information in the UK and in Germany, there's far more similarity than differences across most of these facts compared to the US. China has a few particularities of its own, which we could walk through in further session as groups are interested. So that's that. I'll start by overlooking a few of the main learnings from this year's report, and then walk through 2 sections, deep dive on the main trends, and then going through segmentation, which I think will be interesting to the group. Then we probably end up stopping at that point for Q&A. So there are 5 main messages that come out of this year's research. And again, as mentioned, this will be focused on the US now, but I'm sure I will get some questions on does it look similar to other markets later? As mentioned, a lot more similarities than differences for UK and Germany. So consumers remain highly focused on their health and wellness. Jean-Guy opened with the 82% of people that place this as a top priority or priority, which we've been tracking longitudinally since 2021. And I think that number is both high in and of itself compared to other discretionary categories, which is great news and fueling a lot of the tailwinds for this broadly defined sector. But it is also increasing ever since we look at the reports, and that's quite impressive. And that's I think a testament to the fact that this macro trend of consumers increasingly spending time and money on taking care of themselves, and that taking care of themselves being a broader and broader definition continues. So that's a good news. So the number this year for the US was 84%, is very similar in the other markets. That being said, which is a hint of the opportunity for the industry, many still struggle to get to the outcomes that they wish. So the need for continued innovation, use of information to get them committed to the habits that they wish they had continues to be an opportunity. The sector does better and better every year, but there are more opportunities to do so. Number two is that priorities differ across generations. So we look at wellness as an outcome as a very multifaceted pursuit, whether they are thinking about mindfulness, physical performance, sleep, health, and we'll walk through that in a few minutes. And then we ask different respondents to rank these, right, on what matters more. And one thing that is interesting is to notice the differences in that ranking by generation, and we'll walk through that in a few minutes as well. Number three, not only wellness habits vary widely across age groups, but we also see demographic and attitudinal differences. The second section of what we'll walk through today is a attitudinally driven segmentation, which is usually quite useful for the groups. It is broadly defined on all of these categories here. So it's not as specific as, hey, this is my business, I would like to double click on this, but it's quite applicable to most business leaders we have discussions with. So we hope that'll be helpful for you today. Point number four, health and wellness spend is resilient. We all know this. One of the last things to come off the cutting block is what I spend in order to maintain my good habits. That being said, ever since the last big COVID accepted, which with COVID as an exception, which was obviously a dynamic in and of itself, that what has changed most is the wallet is very fragmented when it comes to fitness and wellness today, right? People are paying a lot of different services. So while the overall spend of time and resources towards wellness is resilient, we did ask people to think about what are the parts of what you're paying for that would be first to go if you were forced to make difficult decisions. And there's a few insights there which we'll get to. And then lastly, several pockets of the market are seeing accelerated growth. We get into trends and some of these at the end. I think it'll be an interesting discussion there as well. I'll go to this, which is a similar page that you've seen last year. This is a reminder. These are for we're double clicking on the US here. The estimated annual spend on all of these categories that promote well-being, we estimate at 500 billion. I think the interesting number is the one below, which is that's growing at about 4 to 5% per year. And we look at all product level data across a lot of these categories in order to come to that numbers. That's a very healthy number compared to many consumer discretionary categories, which is consistent with what consumers are telling us, that they want to spend more time and money on their well-being. And then on the right, you see the 84% that Jean-Guy was alluding to. This is top of mind for people. This is increasingly top of mind every single year. Most people that are participating in these categories say they will prioritize it even more so going forward than they did a year ago. And then the last point at the bottom is, despite all this time and money invested, few are achieving the goals that they wish they could, and we know it's a very inherently difficult pursuit, but there's opportunity to keep helping consumers as they aspire to live their healthier lives. you'll recognize this page for those who've seen it last year. So for the rest of the discussion, I know we have 25 minutes. What I think we'll probably end up doing is hitting point number 1 and 2. Maybe I'll give a very quick glance to trends, but that's probably when we're going to run out of time. Pivot to some questions. Again, by the end of this week, the report will be out. All of the pages, written data points will be available to everybody. This is very similar to the page I just read, so I suggest I will skip through it. I would like to walk through a few of the pages that highlight the main trends. So wellness is a growing particular. Sorry, I just got to figure out where to put the images here. Okay. Wellness is a growing priority, particularly for younger generations. So what we look at over here is how much more of a priority is wellness compared to a year ago. You remember the aggregate number at 56% being presented 2 pages ago. And here we see that to 22% of people, it is a lot more today than it was a year ago. And that number for younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, which you see on the right, is 28%. We bring the generational comparisons across this document. This is one number where that is interesting. And then it's a little bit more now than it was for people a year ago for 34% of people. So there's a grand majority of people. There are very few people for whom it is less of a priority this year than it was last year. And that's consistent with all the numbers you're going to see throughout this document. As you'll remember last year, we divide this complicated pursuit for wellness into 6 dimensions: better health, better sleep, better nutrition, better fitness, better mindfulness, and better appearance. And these are as defined by consumers. This is not McKinsey that has come up with these. This was a lot of qualitative research with consumers as we did this exercise for the first time. This is very consistent with all of the client work we've done over the last 10 to 11 years in the category. It'll never be a perfect isolation of dimensions, but we think these 6 are a good way to think about how the consumer is dividing choices for the allocation of their time and money. And what you'll see on the right is the ranking with the overall population surveyed in the United States of how they rank these priorities. Now, these vary a little bit year by year. These vary by generation, which we'll see in a few slides. But you'll see that better health and better sleep, similar to last year's, pop up as the highest priorities. So the ones that are ranked as top boxes by most respondents, followed by better nutrition, mindfulness, fitness, and finally appearance. This ranking of the 6 dimensions is interestingly different across generations. So you'll recognize the overall numbers on the left, which is the page we just looked at. We called out 2 groups on the right, but millennials and Gen Z, which are increasing their total share of discretionary spending in the population. So we think they're interesting groups to look at. And you'll notice a few interesting things that change. Sleep and mindfulness for millennials rank higher than average. And if you take a look at the numbers, the share of people ranking those as top box, the differences are statistically interesting. And on the right for Gen Z, the one that pops up is appearance, which is an interesting contrast as well. You'll notice that for both groups, overall numbers, even all the way to the down, are higher than to the left. So that's consistent with the first pages saying like, hey, these younger generations are in particular interested and placing priority on their wellness across these dimensions. But the ranking difference is also interesting. Looking more deeply at consumer need states, we see the heart, general health, and cognitive health come out as most critical. This is, of course, one of the lenses where we try to get even more in depth on, in this case, on health, on like, what is it that matters most to people? I'll walk through some of these slides a little bit quicker, given the format of this discussion here, and let you read through in more detail when we publish the report at the end of the week and or in Q&A. Here we tie it to the 13% on the first page. So there are still material unmet needs, right? This is tailoring to the successful track record, I would say, of innovation in the sector of how do we leverage our passion and purpose to the cause to continue to innovate in ways that serve consumer needs better. There's continued to be opportunity to do this more. So you see here divided from left to right between there are not nearly enough product services available to achieve this. On the left is the outcome that they want. On the right in the numbers is their perspective on the availability of products and solutions. So dark blue is there are not nearly enough products, and the second blue is there are some product services available, but I wish there were more. So this is a clear fact that people are still thinking that innovation is a part of the answer across most of these, and therefore they are receptive when people bring products and solutions to market that might meet their needs. Quality and efficacy are key drivers for consumer purchase. There are many things that matter when consumers make decisions here. Quality and efficacy clearly really do. This is also a world of multiple innovation. People have tried many things. So while they still think good products and solutions are needed in order to achieve outcomes, the importance of communicating efficacy and getting the advocacy required to get people to believe the solution works continues to be one of the more important considerations. Of course, price as always pops up as well. We also look at buying factors, and we look at how they vary across the different categories. So we've picked a few here, looking at over-the-counter vitamins and supplements, health tracking devices, menopause products, functional foods, and skincare. We have many more in the report. These pages just get too busy, but we take a look at how the importance of these different buying factors varies across these categories. This is obviously not all categories are equal here. And so that's the type of information that you have available in the report. We talked earlier about the resilience. So compared to other consumer categories, wellness spend is resilient, but it's important to understand now with such a broad basket of wellness goods and solutions spent, which ones might be more susceptible to or more sensitive to consumer wallet pressures, right? And so what we've asked here is, what is the potential? Oh, sorry, 1 second. My screen is weird. What's the potential spending cuts in response to negative impact on consumer economic circumstances? And what we're asking them here is, of the folks who've purchased this in the last 12 months, how many would never cut spending? And we prompt them with a statement that, like, hey, if you were to need to cut spending across your habits, etc., which categories come first? And then we take a look at which categories would they never consider cutting spending on. And this is one of these charts that show the latter question. So you have them ranked here based on the categories that people say they would never look at. You have the number here, which is the percentage of people that have answered to that question. So if we take menstrual care products, 58% of the people that have bought these in the last 12 months state that they would never cut spending on these if they were forced to reevaluate their overall spending habits. I'll give you guys a second to look at the list, and then we'll keep going. Then we take a look at what would be the most likely to cut discretionary spend on. And services or apps are what pop up if there was an economic downturn. So we look here, top 10 potential wellness spending cuts in response to negative impact on consumer economic circumstance. Percentage who selected would be one of the first thing to cut or eliminate completely. So we're looking at the opposite of the last question. And again, we go a broad spectrum of categories that affect wellness. You see subscription meal services coming out at the top with the percentage of folks who've answered this. Period or fertility tracking apps, spa aesthetic treatments, and they go from top to bottom over here. I think as you read this list, there's a few newcomers because there were not categories that were as well developed 5-6 years ago. But I think we recognize most of the categories that have a little bit more volatility depending on how good the economy is. Okay. And then the very same set of questions, but looking across generations, is to which groups of people would be more likely to cut spend if they needed to in these categories. Gen Z and millennial pop first. I think there's a life stage component to this. There's also a likelihood of the group being spending across more subcategories. That information comes in a few pages. So both of those factors contribute to these numbers being higher for Gen Z and millennial. This is the data point I was talking about, is they're also more likely to be spending on more categories, which is what drives the mental equation for consumers to say, hey, I can cut spend here, because the commitment, the use of time and resources to wellness, that's the part which is resilient. What is different now than 10, 15 years ago is the number of categories, the number of things people are spending money on. And so there is a correlation here between how much categories people are spending on and how likely they are to say they would cut spending if they needed to, which to us makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at the time at 9:22. If it's okay, Jean-Guy, I'd like to just walk. I know this is very fast for the quantity of information here.
Please
I'd like to
do.
okay, I'd
Please do,
like to
please do.
walk through the
And even if
segmentation.
we have a shorter Q&A session, please take the time to walk through it, and then we'll just have a few questions at the end. This is really, really interesting. Thank you so much.
I'd like to walk quickly through the segmentation that we've done, because I would anticipate some questions come from that. And it's something that we do with all of our clients. Like we don't use this one. We do a custom segmentation when we do client work. And this is an inherently personal pursuit, so it matters. And so let me walk through a few pages here, hoping that it can help the group. First thing on the methodology, right? We use mostly attitudinal and behavioral segmentation in order to differentiate the groups. So we obviously profile demographics on afterwards. The reason why we do that is, and across the years, having done thousands of these models to figure out what is the best way to segment consumers, attitudes really, really, really matter. So most people come in with strong hypotheses of gender and age and demographic skews, but it is far more that people's attitudes towards health and wellness is a far better way to break groups out in a way that starts understanding how they're making choices in the category. Of course, we profile demographics afterwards. I'll start by talking about the two groups on the left. There are two groups that are particularly engaged in spending in the category: the maximalist optimizers and confidence enthusiasts. There are very stark differences between them, but together they account for more than 55% of the spend in the category. So they matter. Maximalist optimizers are very open and excited to trying a bunch of new things. They tend to skew a little bit younger. And you see they're 25% of the respondents. They have committed psychologically to this idea of being in the well-being lifestyle, and they're looking for answers. And as things come up, they try them out. They spend across a lot of these different categories. And as a result, they spend a lot of money. 41% of the total spend is from that quarter of the population. Confident enthusiasts are very different. They are more likely to have found their answer. They're likely to be slightly older. Whatever works for them, they don't mind spending on it, but they're spending across a slightly smaller share of the categories that are available. And you'll see that as a group, this is the group who considers wellness to be most a top priority. 88% of the group says wellness is a top priority. They're just more likely to have found what works for them at this point. Health strugglers, consumers that experience stress and motivation hurdles that make it challenging to meet their health, wellness, and fitness goals. They struggle with weight management despite their efforts and often feel overwhelmed by their responsibilities. That's another quarter of the population. They do spend almost on cue with the share of the population that they represent, but it is more of a struggle. This matters as an attitude, because as you ask yourself, what is the prompt, what is the brand attributes that will get somebody in this group to realize that this is a product for people like them, you'll notice something extremely different than somebody trying to target the maximalist optimizers. So there's an important difference in this group. They're looking for solutions, but they don't have the same attitudes towards the category and the pursuit. Health traditionalists are usually an older group of consumers. Again, this is profiling at the end, so there are younger and there are older folks in here, but overall the group skews a little bit older. And they prioritize eating right, taking vitamins as their main health management strategies. They routinely check ingredient and nutrition labels, considering healthy routines. So they don't need to spend as much money in the category in order to feel they meet their outcomes. I think traditionalist is the right way to anchor on here. This is not a group that cannot be compelled. They are a group that strives to live healthier lives. You see the number at the bottom of 71% of this group. It's the third highest answer out of all the groups, but they think they've got it down. So again, from a marketing standpoint and from a product innovation, we need to be very purposeful if that's the group we're trying to compel. They go in with I kind of know how to do this. And then lastly is our wellness shirkers. You'll see another fifth of the population here, only 10% of the spend. They do not prioritize health and wellness in their daily lives, like a lot less than other generations. So this is a group of people that are not likely to be open ears and to this. There are other things that are more important to them in life. And yeah, that's our last group. What we do with this segmentation, for those who will read the report after, is we take a look at their consumption and their attitudes across these different categories. I'll give you some examples here very quick, and then we'll stop for the Q&A. But we take a look at the total segment spend across the different wellness dimensions at the top. So if we take our wellness, our maximalist optimizers, and as an example, you see there's a lot of spend on health, but proportionally, there's also a lot of the spend on these other categories. If we take a look, for example, on nutrition, as a bucket that pops out interestingly, so you can look at that throughout. We then take a look at their skew age group. We've been alluding to it in the descriptions. You get the data over here. And I think I'll stop here because I notice we're close to 9:30. I want to make sure I leave room for questions. The rest of this document will just present a lot more of this information, gets into key trends afterwards, which I'm sure will be interesting to the group when you go through. I'll stop on this page as we go to Q&A, because this is our summary of some of the key trends that comes out of the report, and I'm anticipating it might prompt some questions from the group.
Thank you. Absolutely.